Oh, hey YouTube, how are you doing? Now don't worry, I know what you're thinking. These men all have tumors in their backs, but don't worry, it's not a tumor. They just have very big lats, yeah. So we're gonna be talking about the best back lat spread poses. Hey guys, what's up? It's Atominator here, back again, continuing off my series about the best poses of all time. Last time we checked out the best rear double biceps, and this time we're going to be moving on to the best back lat spread ever. So I'm going to be discussing a bunch of bodybuilders, listing them in no particular order, but at the end I will give you my top overall pick. So let's jump into this thing. First up, we got Sergio Oliva, the Myth. Well, no shit. Look at the V-taper. Look at the level of mass. This is like 20 years ahead of its time. This guy was quite the phenom back in the day because he was competing in the 60s, for God's sake. In the 70s, nobody had mass like this. We got Arnold, though. And Arnold, this is not one of his strongest poses for sure. His back wasn't one of his best body parts even, but compared to other guys in his time period, he was one of the best. So that's why he makes the list. It's all relative, right? Look at the calves, too. Now, Arnold wasn't as good as his buddy Franco, though, because Franco had some of the lowest lat insertions ever. Along with Lee Haney and Kai Green, I can't think of anybody else in the history of bodybuilding with lower lats than those three guys. So that's going to bode very well for them in this pose. There he is in the gym. This is world class. This is way ahead of its time for the 70s, right? I guess it could have been early 80s, but anyway. We got Tom Platz, not the widest guy, but pretty good detail through the back here. And look at the calves, man. When the calves stand out in a back pose, man, you know you got good legs. We got Robbie Robinson, and sorry for the shitty quality, but you can see the amazing V-taper on the guy. I wish I could have found more pictures of him in this pose, but the internet was not being kind, and I could not, so let's move on. We got Roy Callender. And not sure what year this was, probably in the 80s because he did compete well into the 80s, and this definitely looks like 80s back development. It looks way too good for the 70s, in which he also competed. And of course he's blocking the year, 19 what? Damn it, man, move your leg. But looking really sharp there, really good back development, Roy Callender. We got Samir Banu, and along with Lee Haney, I think he has the best back of any guy throughout the 80s, and one of the best backs of all time, hands down, but unfortunately I couldn't find him hitting this pose at all. It was all like, you can find like 10 rear double biceps and a bunch of Christmas tree shots, but no rear lat spread poses from the line of Lebanon. So unfortunately, we got to move on. We got Tony Pearson. This guy had really good V-taper, amazing width, because he was competing in the 80s next to Haney and stuff. So also one of the best backs of the 80s for sure. Tony Pearson. They called him the Michael Jackson of bodybuilding because he kind of looked like it. Not that you can tell from these pictures where he's facing away, but you can Google him. And we got Lee Haney himself, of course, he's going to make it. Like I mentioned, those really low lat insertions, always going to play in his favor in these back poses. Here he is again. Again, I couldn't find many good pictures of him in this pose. It's hard to find pictures in the rear lat spread pose for anybody, honestly. Aside from a couple of guys, like the obvious ones like Ronnie and Dorian and stuff, you can't really find a lot of poses, a lot of guys hitting this pose online, even when you Google it explicitly. But here he is, Murder in the Competition is Haney. Here he is next to an older version of Sergio Oliva. Both guys have tremendous V-tapers, as you can see right here. We got Momo Benaziza, and I searched high and low looking for pictures of this guy in this pose because I knew he would look good, and sure enough he does, but this is the only one I could find is this GIF right here. And thankfully that's enough, right? We can tell, look at the thickness and the detail, the V-taper, full development on the guy, one of the best backs ever. We got Sean Ray. A lot of people say he's very narrow, and I agree. Earlier in his career, he was relatively narrow, but this is later in his career. This is 1999. He doesn't really look narrow anymore. He's certainly not the widest guy, that's for sure. But narrow, I don't know about that, man. That's a bit of a stretch, I think. And here he is. Yes, he looks a little narrow next to Lavroni, but that's because Lavroni's wide as a freaking barn door, man. Like, Sean's not really narrow here. He's just, yeah, Lavroni's just wider, that's all. And Lavroni's delts, I do like Lavroni more in this pose. Look at the roundness of the delts. The triceps even are like stretching. They're almost bursting. You can see the stretch marks. His traps look better. He's just really dominating in this pose. He even stands up well against the mass monsters, as we'll see in a second. There he is again. Really solid V-taper. Along with the side chest and the hands clasped most muscular, this is his take-home pose for Lavroni. Here he is next to Nasser Al-Sambadi, a guy who outweighs him by a lot and should look bigger, but Lavroni looks bigger. Of course, he's out-angling him a bit too, so that helps, but still, he's just dominating this comparison. There's Flex Wheeler on the right, and
The reason I didn't include Flex in this video, because I don't, by the way, he didn't make the cut. It's because his lower body is not dialed in enough. You know, he's always been weak and soft in the hams and glutes, and he's not the widest guy. Even his back looks kind of soft here, so that's why he doesn't really fare well in this pose. But Levrone does, and there he is next to the big boys, Ronnie Coleman and Jay Cutler. This probably would have been 2001, based on Jay's posing trunks, and Ronnie looks a little undersized compared to usual. And Jay didn't compete in 2002, so it couldn't have been that year. And 2003, Ronnie would have just been destroying these guys, so it's got to be 2001, I think. But Levrone's hanging with him, man. That's impressive. Here you had him next to Yates and Sean Ray once again. And he's hanging with Yates even. Holy shit. I mean, just based on this one picture here, I don't think it's a very favorable one for Dorian because he doesn't really have his legs flexed, and even Levrone's lower back looks better than Yates, and that's definitely not the case. So, you know, this picture's got a bit of an asterisk on it. But anyway, Levrone's measuring up well against all the best here. You know, Yates, Nasser. So we got Chris Cormier though, and sorry Flex, once again you're getting beaten in this pose because Cormier's a wider guy and he's more conditioned than you. And this is 1999 Mr. Olympia. Now, everybody looked amazing this year. They had really good lighting in this show, but that's not to take away from these guys because it was a very talented lineup and they were all amazing bodybuilders. We got Mike Francois, and this guy is just, he's got very unique kind of lat spread pose because he's got those high lat insertions, kind of like Levrone actually a little bit, as we see right here, how it just kind of flares out really wide at the top, and he's got really good thickness and density. That's his powerlifting background at work there, and even the lower body looks amazing too. Look at the calves. Here we got Nasser El Somebody in between Yates and Ray. Sean Ray not looking narrow, by the way, right? And yeah, Yates is winning this, but Nasser is pretty close in terms of mass. He's basically on the same level as Yates here. Here he is again in 1997 versus Dorian, a year that everyone's saying Dorian should have won, and I agree. Sorry, Nasser should have won, and I agree, but Dorian is winning this this pose right here for sure. Make no mistakes about it. Jean-Pierre Fuchs, another guy from the late 90s who was a real mass monster, and I don't know where the hell this guy was in competitions because I only ever see pictures of him like in photo shoots and stuff like this. Because if he showed up looking like this in the 97 Mr. Olympia, it would have been him battling Dorian, not Nasser. Or we would have had a three-way contest anyway, because this looks more impressive than Nasser's. He looks denser and, you know, better back development overall, more conditioned. So Jean-Pierre Fuchs. We got Art Atwood, another guy who's just massive. Look how big his back is. Sorry about the blurry-ass quality, but what can you do? Here he is. Kind of shitty conditioning, admittedly, but just the amount of meat on the guy is just crazy. I'm not sure who the guy on the right is. Let me know in the comments if you do. We got Caprice Murray, and not even sure if this guy is ever qualified to be a pro or not. I don't think he ever competed at the Olympia, correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't remember ever hearing his name. I didn't hear of him before this, but he's got a pretty impressive V-taper. Look how tight his waistline is. And kind of reminds me of a young Dexter Jackson a little bit because earlier in his career, Dexter Jackson didn't really have well-developed lower lats, and he kind of suffered from this high lat syndrome like you see here. But then he kind of brought him up later in his career. But as for Caprice Murray, look at the shoulder-to-waist ratio. That's amazing. Really good V-taper on the guy. Jay Cutler. And Jay is also wide as a barn door like some other guys we've seen so far. But the thing with Jay is like his waist was also pretty wide too, and through the hips. So his V-taper was kind of, it really detracted from that, and he doesn't look as impressive as you might think he would, especially on his own. But the thing with Jay is he really shines when he's put next to other guys. When he's standing next to other bodybuilders, he really outmasses them and kind of dwarfs most people, so that really plays into his favor, his overall mass. Here he is in 2009. I would argue his best year, and I did in my video, because he was really dialed in. And as you can see from the lower body, he's often really soft there, or earlier in his career he was anyway, but here he's really nailed his conditioning. And he's about as big as he ever got. He didn't really put too much more size on after this contest, but so he's kind of blending the best of both worlds with the mass and the conditioning here. We got Gunter Schlierkamp. This has got to be some of Gunter's all-time best conditioning too, when you look at the lower body there. And really good lat development on the guy. Here he is standing next to Victor Martinez on his left. There's Gunter. There's Gustavo Badell in the center, and Jay and Ronnie on the right. And yeah, Gunter, obviously Ronnie's running away with this. This is probably 2005 would be my guess. Um, but, Gunter, you can make an argument for him coming in second. It's between him and Jay, I'd argue. Although Gunter looks like he's kind of cheating a bit. Looks like he's at least a full step further forward than Victor or Gustavo. But nonetheless, he looks pretty impressive here, measuring up well against some of the best. Then we got him next to Orville Burke there on the right. And when I said this is not the tumor at the beginning of the video, well, I'm not so sure about this guy because these do look kind of tumorous, his lats. It doesn't really look human. It just looks like massive, like tumorous muscle bulging out at you. It's kind of weird, but nonetheless impressive. And I mentioned the same thing in the front lat spread video where I said he doesn't really look human, it just looks like tumorous lats. And sure enough, that statement holds true from the rear as well. And there he is next to Flex Wheeler, completely dusting him. Sorry, Flex, you keep getting the worst of these comparisons, but you're just standing next to guys with better lat spread poses. Here he is next to Joel Stubbs, and Joel Stubbs on his right really has some of the best lats ever. One of the best backs, right up there. You could put him with Dorian and Ronnie. As we can see here, just world-class back development. Unfortunately, his legs and his arms, the rest of his body didn't really match up as well. But here he is like a man among boys, just dwarfing these fools. And the lats, man, holy shit. What more can you say? Here he is. I don't even know who that guy in the middle is, but he looks pretty solid in this pose. I might have included him, but I have no idea who he is because I just came across this picture in a random forum discussion and they didn't bother to label who these guys were. I know that that's Dennis Wolf on the right. Make no mistakes about it, though. Joel Stubbs is winning this comparison still, even with his crappy lower body. We got Dennis James, though, and Dennis is one of those guys who I've mentioned several times before that he always looks better in photo shoots and stuff, like gym photos, anywhere but the stage. Once he gets on stage, he just kind of fades. He seems to get smaller and shrink before your eyes, and he just looks flat and he doesn't really have a lot of detail. But in photo shoots like this, he looks amazing. And this is one of his better poses because he has really good width, as you can see right here. This probably would have been 2003 or 2001. I can't remember what the picture said, but earlier in his career. Here we got Dexter Jackson. And Dexter, what can you say? The guy's got one of the best backs ever. Kind of underrated, actually, because it's not really, people don't really bring him up in that best back discussion. Because he does get kind of, overshadowed by guys with better backs like Phil or Dorian or Ronnie or Kai. But he's got, for sure, a very strong back. It is one of his best body parts. And he really brought up, as I mentioned earlier, he really brought up his lower lats there, as you can see. You can see a Christmas tree in the rear lat spread, which is unusual. So that's really impressive. Here he is next to himself. Not sure what years these were from, if it was from the same year or different, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was pretty much it could have been 5 years apart, because he often looks almost identical. Year to year, show to show, very consistent. Here he is in the 2010 Arnold standing next to Phil, Kai, and there's Branch on the right. And Branch looks unreasonably good in this comparison, because rear lat spread, anything with the back poses, Branch is not really good at, but for some reason he looks better than Kai here. So that doesn't make any sense. Let's put an asterisk on this photo here. But Dexter looks really impressive on the left there with that really good V taper. Here's another Jackson, though, Johnny Jackson, and like Joel Stubbs before him, the legs are really his downfall. His lower body just does not match up to his upper body because his back is really good, even his arms and stuff. His chest is amazing, but the legs are just not good enough, really. So that's why he doesn't place higher, because look at the density. Look through the traps there. Probably the best traps ever on this guy right here. We got Melvin Anthony, though, and you can see a notable lack of thickness and density compared to what we just saw on Johnny. But what Melvin brings is he brings the aesthetics. He's got a more pretty physique. He's got a really good V taper, too, because he's got that really tight cinched-in waist, as you can see right here. So that's why he makes the video. And here he is standing next to, that's Silvio Samuel on the left, Melvin Anthony to his right, Dennis Wolf there, and we got David Henry. And this must be before they introduced the 202 class, now the 212 class, because I don't know why else David Henry would be competing with the big boys here. But yeah, I'm giving this one to Wolf for sure because that overwhelming width. But Melvin Anthony looks really good here too. And speaking of David Henry, here he is. He makes the list because of that tremendous lower lat development. As you can see, very clearly defined. And just kind of got that 3D pop-out effect like what Phil brings, and really good lower body conditioning too. Not the widest guy, but very well developed lats. So that's why he makes it. This guy's an anomaly. This guy might be a one-hit wonder here because his name is David Fenty. I never heard of him before. I don't think he's ever turned pro, and as you can probably tell from those shitty legs, but the back of here is world class, man. This is like more impressive than, or if we're just talking about the back, to me this is more impressive than anything I've seen from Kai in this pose. So that is saying something, man. And but I wasn't able to find many pictures of him, and there was only one or two other pictures of him in this pose, and they didn't really look that good because he wasn't that condition. So could be just a one-hit wonder here. But David Fenty, feel free to look him up. This is Tony Freeman. Of all the guys in this video, I would say he's probably the most underrated, the most underappreciated in this pose because he's got such amazing V-taper. And here he is next to, that's Jay Cutler, Dexter Jackson, and Phil Heath. And he's probably, I would argue he's winning this pose here pretty easily because he's got just as much width as any of them except for Jay, but his waist is like half the size of Jay's, so his V-taper is accentuated and looks better. He's got height advantage on them, and he's just as conditioned as any of them. So this is a complete like Hall of Fame lineup, and I'd say he's winning. So what more can you say? This would probably be a 2008, I would guess, because Jay still has his old haircut. If this was 2009, he would have had different hair, right? But so as late as 2008. But look, Tony Freeman measuring up against 3 Hall of Fame bodybuilders and beating them, I'd say, right here. There he is again. So when Tony Freeman was really in his prime and at his best, he was really solid in this pose. And so is this guy, though, Victor Martinez. This was 2007 Mr. Olympia, his best shape ever, in my opinion. And look, here again, you can see a Christmas tree, a clearly defined Christmas tree in the lower back there, which is unusual to see that in this pose. Usually when guys are actually hitting the rear lat spread pose, you don't see that kind of detail. And look at the conditioning in the lower body, too. Really good V-taper on the guy. He's one of the best to hit this pose for sure in the last decade. And we got Flex Lewis. So this is the champ of the 212 division. And like Phil Heath, he's not really winning this pose through width. He's winning it through the detail and the complete development. And that's probably why he wins the shows too, that complete development. He doesn't really have weak body parts. Look at the calves. He's got really good arms, really good conditioning everywhere. Good detail. So we got Evan Santopani. Couldn't find a lot of pictures of him in this pose, but this one was good enough for my money to make the cut. We got this guy, Essa Obaid. I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name, but I think he's competing today still, and he's got a pretty good V-taper as well. You can see it right there. We got Dennis Wolf, and along with a couple of other guys, one of whom I'll be mentioning in a minute, he's probably got the best width in this pose of any guy throughout history. Look at how crazy wide his shoulders are and the flaring-ass lats. It's nuts. And yeah, Dennis Wolf, he does suffer from high lat syndrome. He does have a weak lower back, but it doesn't really hurt him as much in this pose as, say, it would in the back double bicep. Because lower back isn't as important for this particular position. It doesn't stand out as much. And you can kind of hide it a little bit better. So that's why Dennis Wolf tends to fare better in this pose compared to other back poses. Yeah, but just crazy width, amazing V-taper. Along with like Jay Cutler and Big Ramy, I would say he's probably the widest guy to be able to hit this pose. This guy, Rolly Winkler, is reminiscent to me of Orville Burke because he's got those tumorous lats. And Rolly always had a weak back earlier in his career, but he's really brought it up in recent years. And you can see really good trap development there. Still not one of the best to hit this pose for sure, and definitely not one of the most elite backs in the business right now, but in this pose he looks pretty impressive now, so I had to include him on the list. And there's Lionel Bayecki continuing to impress. He's got, I wasn't expecting him to look as big in this pose as he does, because he's known for being more of an aesthetic guy. He's got that really tight waistline, and that really accentuates his V-taper, as you can see right here. We got Cedric McMillan, and this guy, next to Phil and Kai, I would probably say he's got the best back of any pro right now in the game today. Because he's got that really, really low lats there, tremendous size everywhere, and good overall development. He doesn't look as impressive right here, I guess, but maybe the lighting or his conditioning is a little off, because right here he looks better. So yeah, and he's got very complete development throughout his whole body too. Like the lower body looks good, arms are really good, shoulders. So one of my favorite pros competing today in Cedric McMillan. Then we got Big Ramy. Now, along with Wolf, as I just mentioned, I think he's one of the widest guys for sure to be able to hit this pose. Jay might be just as wide as them, but his waist is bigger, so it doesn't really, that illusion is kind of broken a bit. But Ramy, man, holy shit, the guy's super wide, you know, and he's got all the mass in the world. He's really, you know, he's the biggest threat to Phil Heath right now, I'd say, because he can outmuscle the shit out of Heath. He's got way more mass to work with. And he just needs to bring up a couple of lagging body parts, really continue to nail his conditioning more and more, and develop more muscle maturity, and he'll be a real threat. He could dethrone him for sure, if politics allow it, which I don't think they will. That's why I made a video on it. You can go check it out for my reasons, but don't shoot the messenger, guys. I'm just saying, I'm calling it like how I see it, the way I've seen the IFBB operate for the last several decades. They seem kind of corrupt, and I don't think they'll give it to this guy because of his ethnicity and his lack of English skills and whatever. But anyway, let's move on. Kai Green. Now, next to Ronnie Coleman, I'd say Kai has the best lower body from the back of any pro in history. But unfortunately for Kai, conditioning's always been a question, and when he doesn't come in really conditioned, he looks kind of faded, like here. You don't really see much detail through the back, but when he comes in more dialed in, you can see more stuff going on. It looks more impressive. So with Kai, he has all the mass in the world to work with, just like Ramy, but he just needs to nail his conditioning more. And he's got those super low lats, so that's always going to be to his benefit. Just needs to bring up his traps, though, because as you can see, compared to Jay and Phil here, his traps are really lacking. And Jay looks really good in this picture here. I'd actually have him winning. That's surprising. Here we got Phil next to Kai, and this probably would have been 2012, I do believe, when they were going head-to-head there. But in this pose, man, I got to give it to Phil for all the extra detail through the back. Like, Kai just has no detail through the center of his back, so I think Phil is taking advantage of that. And speaking of Phil, we got him in 2013, and based on these pictures, all the pictures I see of him in 2013 look amazing. I might even revise I made a video saying that I thought 2010 was his best shape ever, and based on video footage, I stand by that, but based on pictures, man, 2013 is the tops for sure. Now, a lot of people say that Phil's narrow, but he doesn't really look like it in this pose right here. So he's not the widest guy for sure, but like Sean Ray, I wouldn't really say he's narrow here, would you? Here we got him in 2014, and he's just so consistent year to year as Phil. He's like the new Dexter Jackson, just always brings it. Even off-season, the guy's got more detail on his back than most guys could hope to ever bring in contests. So that's why I included this pic here. We got him in 2010, though, back before he really put on more mass and upped his width, but he still looks really good. Sorry, guys. So this is something like what Flex Wheeler and David Henry would probably aspire to look like, because those are relatively narrow guys, right? And I bet you they wish they could look like this in this pose. We got him in 2015. And let's move on, though, to Dorian. So I'm saving the best for last. And Yates is one of the best to ever hit this pose for sure, because he's got one of the best backs, obviously. As you can see right here. Here he is hitting a front lat spread pose, but as filmed from the back, and he looks amazing. Look at the calves on that guy. Holy shit. And 1993 looking really good. He's not quite as good as he is from the front in this pose, though. I feel like from the back, he doesn't quite hit that same level of like, holy shit, like this guy is the obvious winner. Here he is in 97, where he was really big, but he wasn't at his best. He wasn't very conditioned, like how he always typically was. But Ronnie Coleman, he's the number one. In my book, no one's better than this in this pose. This is 1998 Ronnie, and if we go back, this is 97 Dorian. This is 1 year removed, and it's light years ahead. So you could argue, like, yeah, that wasn't Dorian at his best, but even still, as we'll see in a second, I compare him, and even Dorian at his best doesn't beat Ronnie in this pose. Here he is in 1999. It's just lights out for everybody. Here he is in 2003. Look at the way that he just flares him out like that. It's like if you had your face next to that and those things hit you, it'd be like getting punched. Because he's just got so much width. He's just so dominating. I don't know if anyone will ever beat this. Here he is in 2003, a still photo of him. Once again, the lower body is just untouchable. Like I don't know if anyone can beat that, or if anyone ever will beat that. Like Kai Green's probably the closest, but Kai's not even as big, and he's nowhere near as diced as this. Then we got, next to Jay in 2003, Ronnie's completely destroying him. It's no contest. Next. We got 1999 Ronnie, if you believe that, on the right, with Phil Heath in 2011, and he's mopping the floor with him. Like, you can't even argue that Phil's anywhere close. So, next. And we even next to Dorian. 1999 Ronnie smokes him, right? The only thing I would give to Dorian is the calves, really. Maybe you could argue his lower traps look a little bit more impressive than Ronnie's, but Ronnie's upper traps are better. His lower back even looks better, which is something that Dorian fans often say is Dorian's superior in that department, but not in this picture here. Maybe he is overall, if you look at their contest history, but I mean, in this picture right here, Ronnie's got him beat in the lower back. He's smoking him in the lower body, so that's why Ronnie is my number one. And I would say there's only one person you can compare him to here, and that is himself. So that's the number one best rear lat spread pose of all time as far as I'm concerned. Let me know in the comments if you agree. Let me know if I missed anybody. And next time we're going to be checking out the best side tricep pose. But until then, I'm the Tominator signing off. Thanks for watching. I'll be back.